You're going to showboat, knock down the shot.
For what his value is, it doesn't equate to winning basketball.
When you're talking about the greatest of greats, that's what you have to do. You have to nitpick.
We'll see you in the playoffs. We'll see you in the playoffs.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Team Up podcast. I am Jace Eustace, joined, as always, by Jarrett Huff. Jarrett, how are you doing? We are in the NBA Finals. How's it going, my man?
It's going pretty well. I mean, it's a little toasty out here. It's in the 90s every day, but I'm loving it. It's kind of why I moved down here for. People look at me backwards when I say that, but yeah, I'm loving the good weather.
It hasn't got too bad here in Illinois so far. It's been like the last couple of days been like high of 80s. You know, when the sun goes down, it's been hitting like the 60s. I'll take that any day. I don't like, the crazy heat that we get here in Illinois. But
what, you don't like mid 70s at midnight?
No, I'm not a fan of that personally. But we got a lot to get into in the NBA this podcast. And of course, what better place to start than the ongoing NBA Finals? Of course, my Miami Heat taking on those Denver Nuggets. As we sit right now, recording this Friday morning, it is currently 2-1 Nuggets in this series. Obviously, Denver took game one before Miami came back in game two to steal home court advantage, but that did not last long as the Nuggets came back in game three to take game three in Miami. So as we sit right now with the Nuggets leading 2-1, Jared, do you think that the Heat still have a chance in this series?
I do think the Heat still have a chance, but the big concern for the Heat is they have to figure out how to limit the Nuggets' looks inside, particularly with Nikola Jokic. He gets basically anything he wants inside, which was a huge problem for them in game three. It seemed like every time Jokic flipped up a ball, whether it was a good looking shot or not, it went in, and the Heat just can't allow that because, as we saw, the Heat were able to prevent their turnovers as they only had one in the first half.
Yeah.
But they're shooting 39% from the field, but the Nuggets were connecting on over 50% of their shots. And the only reason the Heat were able to stay in the game is because they were eliminating their turnovers. As we saw, that was a problem in the second half as the Nuggets were able to pull away, and the Heat were never really able to get back into it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's all going to come down to game four. I think obviously we're looking at these teams where the talent level, it's a big gap between the talent level when you talk about on paper. So if Miami were to go down 3-1, I don't see any scenario where they could possibly come back. I think obviously tonight, Friday night, is the series essentially. You know, if Miami can come back and take this game, and you talk about, hey, we split, now it's a best of three series, Miami's still going to like their chances. But I agree with you. Just Heat, they need to hit their shots. They need to hit those 3-point shots. When those shots are not going in, they're basically drawing dead on that any given night. And as we saw in the regular season, they weren't a good 3-point shooting team, but so far in the postseason, they've been one of the best. I think it's one of the numbers that if Miami's not hitting like 42% from three, they're losing the games in the postseason. That's a pretty high mark from a team, but they've been able to do it obviously on this run. Miami does not have the benefit of being more talented. They also have to outwork Denver. And in game three, they were not outworking the Nuggets. The Nuggets were going out there. They were doing what they needed to do. They were playing, doing the dirty work down low, getting the rebounds. I think a lot of the rebound disparity too had a lot to do with Miami was missing obviously a lot more shots, which created a lot more rebound opportunities for Denver, on the defensive end. But I still think they have a chance, but not if Jokic and Murray are playing like prime Shaq and Kobe. I mean, that's literally what they were there in game three with two 30-point triple doubles. Jokic at 30, 20, and 10 game.
Insane.
He was insane. And I think game three really concerns me because the Heat have yet to see a really nice game from Caleb Martin and Max Strus. And I think we kind of baked in, especially with Caleb Martin coming off of, some people thought that he should have won Eastern Conference, finals MVP in that series. I disagreed. I think he was number two, but he was great throughout that entire series. He was fantastic, and Miami really hasn't been able to rely on him on the offensive end. He's still, getting it done on the defensive side, but when he's not knocking down his shots, it really affects that Miami offense and how they've been set up. And especially in game three, when Michael Porter Jr., KCP, Bruce Brown, they were all off, I felt like that was an opportunity for Miami to just say, you know what, Yoke, you might get 50 points, but we're going to win because your others are not hitting shots. And I got to give credit to Denver because they went out there in the second half. They shut that down. Jamal Murray was great getting that triple-double, even though he kind of that last rebound there at the end just to get the triple double because he's in there with like 12 seconds left just to grab a rebound. But who cares? It was basically triple double. He was fantastic. And, the Nuggets obviously rolled there in the second half. So I think they definitely still have a chance. But I want to ask, what do you think the Heat need to do, tonight in game 4 to make sure they get back in the series so this isn't, over going back to Denver 3-1?
Well, it sounds easier said than done, but the biggest thing the Heat need to do is they need to start hitting shots.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. As we saw, Strus struggled mightily in game 1, and wasn't too great in game 3. We need him hitting more shots. We need more offense from Caleb Martin. He had like a nice 8-point little spurt,
Yeah.
I believe, in the second quarter. And then we really didn't hear much from him the rest of the night. He was kind of a non-factor on the offensive end of the ball. But I think a key element to the Heat's success that we haven't seen as much in this series so far is Jimmy Butler. We
Yep.
need Jimmy Butler to be him for the Heat to have a chance in the series. We need to see him more aggressive, going to the rim, drawing fouls, getting to the line, something he's excelled at throughout these playoffs as he's been on what I think is one of the most impressive single player runs I've seen in my lifetime. Kind of reminds me of Kawhi Leonard willing the Toronto Raptors to the 2019 NBA Finals. That's the first thing I can compare it to. So yeah, we just need to see Jimmy Butler get aggressive and put the team on his back if he still has the strength to do so.
Yeah, and I was encouraged early on in game 3 because I think he had 10 points in the first quarter.
Yeah, he looked aggressive.
I'm sitting there, like you said, he came out aggressive, and I was like, okay, this is what we need. This is going to be a Miami Heat type of game. It's going to be close throughout. They're going to grind it out at the end. That's what they do. But then Jimmy, it seemed like he pulled back a little bit. He was missing a couple of his shots, so it kind of, encouraged him not to shoot as much as he was early on. I agree with you. Jimmy Butler, it seems like he has a constant green light that he necessarily doesn't always want to take advantage of, where he's kind of, we talk about it a little bit with LeBron. Obviously, LeBron, all-time leading scorer, one of the best ever. But LeBron always wanted to get people involved, especially in the playoffs, because he realized he can't just do it all himself. And sometimes Jimmy is a little bit too much that. Like, where some of these guys, like, they'll keep going in the flow of the offense. They're seeing you knocking down shots. You're getting that lead. If you could push to, a 6-8 point lead early on in the game, then you start getting these open threes for these other guys. They start knocking them down. That confidence comes real quick on the offensive end. So I think I agree with you. Jimmy's got to continue to be aggressive. I think what they have to do as well is limit what Jokic does passing the basketball. I know Eric Spoelstra is not going to be happy to hear a lot of people talk about that as he kind of put down the whole make him a scorer, don't make him a distributor thing. But you have to limit him as much as you possibly can from distributing that basketball. I think you have to stay home on the shooters as much as possible. I know it's counterintuitive because you're trying to go play help D, especially when we got Bam trying to post him up there on the block. And you got to be okay giving up 40 to 50 points to Joker as long as you keep his impact on the others on the floor as low as you possibly can. And I think Spo, he's got to come back with more adjustments, man. The Tyler Zeller minutes have been awful for Miami. Anytime they've had any sort of run and Tyler Zeller has to come in, it's just been really bad. And I think we need a little bit more of Kevin Love to kind of fill those spots. They don't have a lot of size down low, especially when Bam Adebayo is off the floor. And I think Bam should be mirroring Jokic's minutes. When Jokic comes in, Bam is coming in as well. When Jokic takes his, couple minutes out, I think that's when Bam has to get his rest as well. Because Bam, really, he has to stay on the floor. He's the only one that can kind of have a little bit of size up against Jokic. And Bam, he's an undersized center when you talk about a lot of the things that he does as well. But he's got the athleticism to stay in front of him, and he's got long arms and everything like that. So it's going to be a struggle. It's going to be a struggle.
Yeah, and series like these are exactly why I say true traditional centers still have a place in today's game. Players with size still have a place because it's starting to get to a point where in these finals, you're going to be running against some of the biggest players in the league because they're some of the best. I mean, look at it. If it's the Lakers, you're going to run into Anthony Davis. You're going to have to find somebody to match him. The 76ers, someone's got to match Joel Embiid. He's one of the most dominant players in the game. The Bucks, Giannis Antetokounmpo, very hard player to stop. And as we're seeing in this series, when Jokic goes inside, he gets about just everything he wants, even if Bam's on him. He's a tough player to stop. Going back to what you said about limiting his passes, it worked for the Heat in game 2. I think Jokic only had 4 assists.
Yeah.
And the Heat got the win. I think that is a huge key on what the Heat need to do. just to stop the Nuggets on the offensive end, instead of worrying about what they can do on their own offensive end to fix things. So yeah, like I said, they need to do two things. Butler needs to find his aggression. He
Yep.
needs to find his rhythm. He needs to become him. That's what he has to do. And the Heat have to limit Jokic.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously easier said than done. But I want to ask too, as we've talked a lot about Nikola Jokic, and a lot of people have their opinions a lot before this season with Nikola Jokic. But I just want to ask from your perspective, what would a Nuggets title mean for Jokic's legacy?
Oh, it means everything. Not only would he indisputably, which I already think he's been for the past couple of years, indisputably be the greatest Denver Nugget of all time. A franchise since its merger into the NBA in 1976 has never been to an NBA
Yep.
finals. That is, he's forever immortalized with that franchise.
Oh, yeah.
And I think in the NBA, I think once a player reaches the upper echelon, to give a franchise that hasn't had something for the first time, that's huge. And also based on just, we've seen Jokic win two MVPs, nearly win a third consecutive.
Yeah.
Some can argue that based off of this playoff run, maybe he should deserved it. But again, it's a regular season award, and Joel Embiid was fantastic. I don't care what
Absolutely.
he did in the playoffs. He was a worthy and deserving MVP. So I'm just going to leave that there. When it comes to Jokic, he's got the MVPs. He's had deep playoff runs. He's got the stats. He's got the skill. He's got the talent. And the team around him, very talented, but it's not your traditional super team. Jamal
Yeah.
Murray is a true second star, I believe. He looks like one of the best players in the NBA throughout these playoffs. The man's never made an all-star team.
Yeah.
And he was
No.
coming off an injury where he missed more than a year of basketball. Like, so, and Jokic he's not playing with like a super team. He's just playing with a very well-rounded, very talented, very tight-knit group. And it's great to see something like that. I think if Jokic wins the finals, this puts him like easily within the top 30 NBA players we've ever seen. And it definitely puts him up into like top 10 centers we've seen in NBA history. Like he's going to be rubbing elbows with names like Patrick Ewing and Hakeem Olajuwon and guys like that. And it's not too early to say that. It's not insane to say that. He's been in the league a while, and he's producing right now before our eyes. Face it, Jokic is here and he's among the best.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, when you put yourself on a name, if you're on a list of names where you got two MVPs and you win an NBA Finals as that number one guy, odds are he'll win the Finals MVP. Obviously, if they win the Finals, he might even win it. If they don't win the Finals, it's a conversation that some people are having as well. But
I hate
this
that conversation.
this would be huge, man, because many of the people who were not ready to crown Yoke, which I was one of them, was waiting for him to go on a playoff run like this. I was
Mhm.
in no, a lot of people, they were really quick on Yoke, and I get it. It's because Denver hasn't had, that type of success. They're just waiting for that next guy. Denver's a great basketball city. Obviously, they've shown that throughout these playoffs, and they've shown that throughout these last 4 or 5 seasons as well. I have been waiting on him to go on a run like this to prove that he's deserving of those MVPs, because a lot of the times that's what we do. We give you that MVP when you first kind of show up, you arrive. We might give you a second one, but once that second one comes around, it's like, okay, now we expect more. We expect you deep runs, conference finals, NBA. Like you're in your prime now. Jokic is 28 years old. This is where he's supposed to be the best that he's going to be. And now, he's been to a conference finals back in the bubble, lost to the Lakers, who eventually won the NBA championship that series or that season. Now he's in the NBA finals. He's up 2-1. He's playing a team that, on paper, they should definitely beat, but I don't think it's by far any easy NBA finals. I mean, Miami had to run through the 1 and 2 seed of the Eastern Conference to get there, obviously on a great run. So I don't think that diminishes anything if they're able to win this series. And a run like this in your prime is huge for legacy. And the numbers he's putting up have been so ridiculous that really there's no one in the league right now that can kind of I would say that there's one person in the league that can kind of put up the title of best player in the world right now, and that's Giannis. And I
Mhm.
think Giannis, we're kind of losing a little bit as far as recency bias, because the last time we saw Giannis was a little bit running from the free throw line because Miami took advantage of him, obviously got out in 5 games in that first round. And I wouldn't be ready to crown him the best player in the NBA right now if they lose to Miami, because I don't think you can take that title away from Giannis and give it to Jokic if they both lose to the same team in that
Mm-hmm.
same, playoffs. I will have to give serious consideration though if they finish this one off, if they finish it off in 5, or if they finish it off, in 6, and it looks fairly easy and they're in control of everything, that he might be the best player in the NBA right now. And I think most people would probably recency bias. Everybody loves it in the NBA. They're sitting here watching these games every night and they're saying, oh, he's easily the best player in the NBA. I just think it's been a couple months since we've seen Giannis. We've seen some of these other guys. Jokic is great, but I think we got to put things in a little bit of perspective as far as that goes. But like you said, Jokic, he's rubbing elbows. I think he's past Patrick Ewing already. Personally, I'm not a big Patrick
That's
Ewing
fair.
guy, a guy who never won a title, but up there with Hakeem. Obviously, Hakeem's got a couple titles as well, so he's up there. When you're talking about the greats up there with the Kareems and the Shaqs and those type of guys, he's starting to get himself in that territory where if he can run off, 2 or 3 titles, maybe win another MVP, he's definitely putting himself in that conversation. So it's interesting. I wanted to another question I had too about this series that you kind of touched on too. Do you think this finals matchup with what a lot of people perceive as 2, real teams, real basketball teams, could kind of serve as a message for the rest of the NBA as far as how to manage things going forward?
Yeah, I kind of heard them talking about that. I forget if it was before the finals on TNT or if it was like on the ESPN panel, which I gotta say, TNT, buy the rights to the finals. Like I'm gonna miss hearing like Jeff Van
Yep.
Gundy and Mike Breen and oh my
Mark
Mark
Jackson.
Jackson
Yep.
was not coming to me for a minute. I don't know why. But I need that TNT like panel, or at the very least, I need to find a quick way to switch to NBA TV like right after the game because I want to hear Shaq and Chuck, who are
Yeah.
basically still at these games. It's like the
Yeah, they're
full
still
TNT
going.
panel is just I don't think Kenny or Ernie are there.
Nope.
Um, but like I'd much rather like listen to that than like Stephen A. Smith try to like ESPN try to
Yeah,
push Stephen
Michael
A. Smith on
Wilbon
us.
and
I like
like
Wilbon. I like
Wilbon. Well,
Wilbon,
and then
but
Jalen Rose over there in the corner too, and
yeah, it's
yeah,
just it's not the
not
same.
the
But
same.
that's that is not the question you're asking. Um, so sorry for my
Oh,
tangent.
you're good.
But yeah, I heard on TV, it was like a week ago or something like that, how the teams in these playoffs that have found the most success obviously have not been super teams.
Yeah.
And they're saying how this could show franchises and general managers and owners that you don't need a super team to field a competitive title contending NBA team. Jokic and Jimmy Butler have proved that.
Yeah.
You just need a player that you can trust on a nightly basis and surround him by a cast of complementary players, a few fringe stars that just fit very well together. And you can go on a run like this. You just got to find that generational talent, which I think Jimmy Butler is flirting with that designation as we've seen
Yeah.
in these playoffs.
Especially in the postseason. Yeah.
And Jokic is undisputably a generational talent. The Nuggets have it. The Heat have their guy in Jimmy Butler. I'm hoping that this becomes a trend where we start to move back towards decades like the 90s and earlier 2000s, where yeah, maybe we'll see a star pair up like LeBron and Anthony Davis. But it's going to be a lot of teams to where we come into an NBA season like we have the past couple of years, and I've loved it. I don't care if we don't have a Lakers, Warriors, or Celtics involved finals. We have teams where I don't know who's going to be in the finals at the end of the year. And the Nuggets looked like the best team for most of the season, and here they are at the end of the year. But with their record all season, I wasn't confident they were going to make the finals because there are other teams in contention in the West, because the West was the most interesting conference. And I love that because there were 5 or 6 teams I could have came out and be like, yeah, that makes sense. Even by the end of the season, I'm like, you know what? If the Lakers come out of the West, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
It makes sense. I love where the NBA is right now with parity. I think it is the best thing for the league. I'm glad we're, for the moment, at least, done with the super team era because it was all I had to watch as a teenager. Yeah. And I was tired of it. And I was tired of my Chicago Bulls running into it. The Bulls are a non-factor now, but I don't care because basketball is in a very good place. Chicago's not, but basketball is.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it should definitely be a message to the rest of the NBA, but I think what should be more a message is how the Heat approach talent development, year in and year out. They continue to work and make their guys better, and kind of grow into roles on the team, which we do not see in today's NBA. So often these teams bring in a basketball player and they kind of accept them as who they are and place them into the role, accordingly that they have on their team. And Miami has spent time. They've helped build guys like Max Strus, Caleb Martin, Gabe Vincent for the roles that they're in now. Those guys wouldn't have been able to fulfill those roles when they first came to Miami. But over these last years, with the hard coaching that they've given to them, the trust that they have put into them, and just the work that the players have put in as well in the offseason and just kind of grinding through those regular seasons, they've earned the moments that they're in. They've earned the roles that they're in too, and they're doing a good job out there. The moment is not too big for them. I don't care about undrafted. If you were a second round pick, where you came from, we're a long time past the draft. It's about what type of player are you now, and they've continued to get better. And we've seen a lot of guys from Miami continue to work up, and they get paid. Sometimes they go elsewhere, which that happens in the NBA. They can get a bigger paycheck to go elsewhere, but it should serve as a message to the rest of the NBA that you don't have to constantly just kind of chase that next guy. It's okay to invest in your guys that you have, put trust in them, make smart moves, make underwhelming moves. And not to mention, look at the guys that are undrafted. We only have two rounds in the NBA draft. There's a lot of talented basketball players that are out there that find their ways, overseas for a couple of seasons that are just really talented and can contribute on an NBA level if you put the time in and you let them get comfortable with the team. So I think that should be a message to the rest of the NBA. And obviously with the Nuggets, what they've done as well, they haven't brought in a lot of guys. A lot of their guys are homegrown. A lot of their big contributors, obviously, in Jamal Murray and Jokic. Jokic being a second-round draft pick, Michael Porter Jr., that continue to invest in him. And then, like you said, bringing in the right guys, KCP, Bruce Brown, their rookie, Christian Brown, who was really good in Game 3 as well, one of the unsung heroes in that one. They've continued to build around it, and it's really nice to see. I agree with you. I hope the NBA starts to go in this direction. I just don't know if a lot of NBA front offices have that continuity that they can continue to invest in their guys. So it's going to be interesting to see. A lot of people don't have, Michael Malone and Eric Spoelstra too, heading your team. So it's going to be interesting, but it should definitely serve as a message. But we should move on a little bit from the NBA finals, because in the NBA, there's always a lot of other storylines going around. And one of the bigger ones that a lot of people now are talking about on the internet is Damian Lillard. Of course, we talk about this pretty much every offseason. I think he was on a podcast with someone. He was asked about, if a trade were to go through with Dame, which ones would he be, okay to see happen? And so it's that time of the year. If Damian Lillard were to be traded, where would you like to see him go? Where do you see as a good fit to get Dame in there?
Well, first off, I just want to say I feel like we get to a point in every offseason. We're a little early this year, but it always gets to a point where it sounds like Lillard's move is imminent. Whether it's from a journalist saying something, or the Blazers might be saying something, or he might be saying something. Like last season, I thought Dame was gone.
Yeah.
Because it came out of the blue, the reports like Blazers are looking to trade Lillard. And then nothing happened, as it has the last previous years. Same thing with CJ McCollum. CJ McCollum was in a trade rumor basically every year since he broke out. And he didn't move for years until he was traded last midseason to the Pelicans. As for teams that would be the best fit for Damian Lillard, obviously I would love to see him stay in Portland. I love the old school mentality of this is my team, this is my city, the city is taking me in. I'm going to do what I can for this city. I'm going to keep fighting. I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to take the easy way out. I still think Dame is in that headspace. I'm willing to bet that he's not going to be anywhere different by the end of the season. Or by the start of next season, we're going to see him in black, red, and white. And it's unfortunately not going to be the Chicago Bulls, black, red, and white. It's going to be in Portland, but that is okay. However, if he were to go somewhere else, I think one of the top teams that'd be a very interesting fit, and you might like to hear this, Miami Heat, which I think that's in that podcast or whatever. I think that was one of the teams he said would be a really
he said
good
him and Bam are real good friends, and then he also said the two teams he mentioned were Miami and then Brooklyn, because he said him and Mikal Bridges are really tight as well.
Yeah. For starters, that would give the Heat a great shooting backcourt. Pairing him and Tyler Hero together would be a dream. Him and Jimmy Butler, I feel like, could play off each other very well. He adds a lot of shooting and more offense, because we've seen at times the Heat struggle when Jimmy Butler's not on the floor, especially with Tyler Hero being out basically the entire playoff so far. I think that'd be a very interesting pair up, especially with Lowry aging. You would probably definitely have to do something in Lowry's contract, whether you stretch him or uh, buy him out, something like that. Because I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I don't think they could be on the roster at the same time with how that all maths out. Obviously, the Lakers name is going to get thrown in with basically with every superstar on the move or something. The Lakers are somehow going to come into the conversation, just as they do. Um, I think another really interesting team would be the oh, sorry, I had it here for a second. Oh, another really interesting team I think would be the Brooklyn Nets. They look like a team where they're kind of waiting for a superstar to be in place. Like we saw Mikal Bridges go on his tear, and
Yeah.
I feel like he might be a very nice number two. Is the Nets still have some real players on that team where if they're able to get a quick fix and turnaround with a star, they might be a competitive team in the East next year. And I think Damian Lillard could be a player like that. As long as somehow the Nets are able to keep most of their talent and trade maybe more future assets or developing players that won't help right away,
Yeah.
if at all possible. Um, there is an outside chance now with everything going on with the Suns, where maybe they make a trade with Aiden, or if I don't know, because it's so conflicting with the Chris
Yeah, we
Paul
don't know what's going
reports.
on with the
Is he
Suns.
on the roster? Are they still looking to trade him? Did they officially waive him? Because I've seen both come out at the same time, so I don't
Yeah.
really know what's going on there. But is there a move where maybe they package Chris Paul and Aiden and then pair him with Devin Booker and Kevin Durant? Uh, who gets the ball between the three of them? That is
Yeah.
that is a conversation to be had. I don't know about the fit, but that is always a potential possibility, I suppose, if they can make the money work. Um, but yeah, I feel like the best option for Lillard would be the Miami Heat. The Brooklyn Nets might be the most interesting, and the Suns potentially could be the most terrifying. And then I guess I just have to throw the Laker name in because the Lakers just want to be here. They
Well,
just want to be there.
they want to be there, and they looks like they're going to be in need for a point guard as well. So the
Yes.
fit is definitely there. But for me, it's obvious that Dame Lillard should want to go to Miami, and he should already be in talks with the front office about the move. It's the perfect spot. It is the perfect spot, and he's now in a situation where he's kind of on a legacy free roll, where no one can criticize him for leaving at this point, especially with how outward he's been about being committed to the Portland Trailblazers. If they're just at this point not on the same timeline, I think it would benefit Dame from leaving. Now, all this being said, I want to say I'm saying should, because we know Dame, he doesn't operate like the rest of the NBA stars in this league. So I'm not saying any of this is going to happen. I'm saying this should be happening behind the scenes, should be in talks with the Miami Heat. I've said it for years now. It's still here in the NBA Finals the biggest weakness for Miami. They need a bona fide bucket getter. I feel like I have just driven that nail home for pretty much since we started this podcast. It's what I've been saying about the Miami Heat. And hello, Damian Lillard. Like, could you think of a better guy that could just come in and immediately fill that role for Miami? His biggest weakness in his game is his defense. But in Miami, not only could Spo work around his deficiencies, everybody else that would be on the floor with him can guard their asses off. So it's not going to be as big of a deficiency as if he goes to one of those other teams like the Suns, who's playing defense, out there with those guys. There's not a lot of defense. You're going to be having to score 135 points to win the game. You come to Miami, you're saying, Dame, I want you to score. Jimmy Butler is okay scoring 15 points a game if he's playing lockdown defense, he's moving the ball around. Damian can just take as many shots as he wants to because he's going to be the one that's going to hit most of those shots that he takes. So I think not only is it perfect spot as far as on the floor, but also in coaching too. He's never had a head coach like Eric Spoelstra. I'd be just foaming at the mouth to see what Spo would be able to do with Damian Lillard in that backcourt. And like you said, with Tyler Hero, if you can hang on to him and he's not part of a trade, which if there's some sort of trade, Portland might be very interested in Tyler Hero. So you don't know if you're going to be able to hang on to him as well. But Dame, Butler, and Bam, and that collection of guys that would be left on the team after a trade, in my eyes, they would easily come into next season as the favorite in the Eastern Conference if you're putting down on paper. Make the call, Pat Riley. Make the call. Let's get it done. Win or loss, in the NBA Finals, whether we win or whether we lose. You can make the argument, though, if you're looking at Dame Lillard and you want to get Dame Lillard, and with the way that he has managed his career, it's almost better if we lose the NBA Finals, because he probably not want to come to a team that just won the NBA Finals without him. So it's kind of a weird situation I'm going in, and internally, I want Dame. I'd also, we're in the finals. Love to win the finals. but we'll see how all that plays out. But I hope something changed because I'd love to see Dame playing meaningful basketball again because when he's been in the playoffs, he's hit like I think it's two walk-off series wins, and he's only
Yeah.
won like two or three playoff series in his entire career.
Hasn't
He's
only
a,
been that many.
it has not been a lot. Like I think he made the second
Has to be
round.
more than that
I
because
don't
he
know,
made a
man.
conference finals one year. That's
Well,
two
I
wins.
I think if he's won three, I think he's only won three playoff series, and I think two of them have
I'm gonna look
been.
this up.
Yeah, it hasn't been a lot there for Dame, but I think he should want to go to Miami. I think it's a perfect fit down there. Hey, no state income tax, Dame. I know you're not really worried about money. You've made plenty of it in your career, but
Mm-hmm.
just throwing that out there, man. It's just another benefit for Miami. But oh, I'd love to see it. But yeah, you kind of mentioned here, and it's going to kind of lead us into our next topic, and that's Chris Paul. He's expected what we heard to be waived by the Suns, and then there
Mm-hmm.
was reports that came out that basically said, "Hey, hold on, we haven't waived him yet. We're kind of working on possibly a trade with him." So, if CP3 gets waived, where do you kind of see is the best fits for him as a free agent?
Well, the first team, and like I say every time, it's going to be the Lakers. That's a team that's going to come into conversation. Why? Because he's friends with LeBron, because they love bringing in old players. And um, he maybe should have been there over a decade ago.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I actually think in this scenario, Chris Paul would be a good fit for the Lakers, and not just saying it because the Lakers are the Lakers or whatever. But like you said, the Lakers are going to need a point guard.
Yeah,
They're going to, if you want LeBron to come back, which I think he is, I don't think for a second LeBron's not going to come back
I think he is
regardless
too.
of what's done with the roster. I think he was just kind of trying to control the narrative, which LeBron's really good at doing. Um, and I think CP3 would be the answer to a lot of the Lakers' problems. They would go into a season with a true floor general that fits their team, not like going in two seasons in a row with Russell Westbrook and then having to change it midway through the season and bring in a bunch of new players. Um, I think CP3 would be a good fit in Los Angeles. He's been tied to a lot of teams. This could be
Yeah,
more just me seeing the Bulls media side of things, but Chicago Bulls have been a name thrown in there. They have a Lonzo Ball sized hole in their backcourt.
yeah.
As we've heard reports, Lonzo Ball may never play
He
basketball
may
again.
never play basketball again.
But hey, those 54 games or whatever they were, man,
Yeah.
those 54 games in
Yeah.
2021 and part of 2022 were magical.
Yep.
Thank you, Lonzo Ball, for
Might be
making
all
me
you get though.
believe. Yeah. Um, so I think personally the Lakers are probably the best fit for Chris Paul. I hate to see the Suns' tenure end already. It was a tough year for him health wise,
Yeah.
and we see him he lost a step or two, but I still think Chris Paul is a vital player in the NBA. And I think any team that gets him is a very lucky team and probably a team that is gonna compete because he's still one of the best point guards in the game. He's one of the last point guards of his kind where he's a pass first.
Yeah.
If I can get my team going, I'm going to do that. And if need be, maybe we could still see a Chris Paul hit a few mid ranges and kind of put a team on his back every once in a while. We didn't see much of that this season, but who knows? Maybe he still has something left in the tank for us.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm seeing a lot of LA talk, and I'm seeing the team up there with LeBron and the Lakers, but I'm also seeing a little bit of Clippers too, a reunion with the LA Clippers as they're in
I
need
would
for a
love
point
that.
guard as well. So that's something to keep your eye on. But an interesting team that I kind of thought of too to keep an eye on if they decide not to waive and kind of work out a trade and they're able to do that, I would say keep your eye on Boston because Boston, they need a true point guard that can kind of get them into offensive sets. And the Suns, they need bodies and they need defense. And I think that they could get that in a couple guys like Marcus Smart and like maybe Grant Williams or whoever you work in off the bench that can come in and knock down a three. Because the Phoenix Suns, we know they just kind of ran out of guys in the postseason that they could come out there and play. And I think Boston is in need of that true point guard. Marcus Smart, he's tried to fill the role. Obviously, he's not a pass first guy. He's kind of more of a 3-and-D guy from the point guard position, which you don't see a lot. I think having Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, obviously in those wing spots, playing all pretty much all the games that they're healthy. Obviously, they're young guys. They can kind of shoulder the load offensively. Having a guy like Chris Paul would kind of be invaluable to get him into those sets and in the playoffs, so they're not just running around just jacking up threes. They're actually running plays. They're running an offense. I think that can
Mm-hmm.
make them a lot more dangerous if Chris Paul is there come postseason time. And I think if he's waived, I think we could see places like Miami being a target, barring any sort of move with Dame. Obviously, I think they're going to be looking for a point guard. Unfortunately, I think they're going to end up losing Gabe Vincent because he's going to be in for a really good payday, and I don't think Miami's going to be able to match that. So I foresee Miami losing Gabe Vincent, which leaves a hole there in your point guard position. But I also think Memphis is a team to keep your eye on to kind of come in there with Ja Morant. I know it's got kind of a fire and gasoline type thing going on possibly, but I think it's something that Memphis might be interested in. I don't know if Chris Paul will be interested in it. He might be the one that would nix that. But another interesting one that I've seen thrown around a couple times is San Antonio. Going to San
Oh,
Antonio, playing alongside Wemby and playing with Coach Pop. The only way he makes this move, though, is if Chris Paul accepts the fact that he's not going to win a finals. If he still wants to chase a finals, obviously Lakers, Clippers, Boston, even Memphis would all take priority over that one. But if he decides that his legacy is going to be a guy that came in, made everybody around him better, he is the point god, he's a Hall of Famer, even without an NBA finals under his belt. I think that might be a perfect spot for him to finish out his career. Going to San Antonio, him and Coach Pop, there basically would be two coaches, in the year. He's got maybe could be, when he's all said and done, one of the best big men to ever play in Wemby. Just throw it back to Lob City days and throw it over the top and have your 7'5" guy just go up there and get the ball and then slam it down. So I think that's something to kind of look at as well. But that's only if he decides, hey, NBA Finals is not going to be in the cards for me. So I think that's kind of a last-ditch effort if he's not getting the attention from these contending teams that I think he thinks he's going to get.
no. I think Chris Paul is far more likely to go to a contender, as interesting as the Spurs concept would be. I think Boston, like you said, would make a lot of sense. And hopefully, for the sake of Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, he'd make their lives easier because
Absolutely.
hopefully they don't have to make as many decisions with the ball in their hands as we've seen. Those two are probably the most turnover-prone duo I've seen in my entire life.
Absolutely.
And I've watched a lot of Warriors basketball over the past couple seasons, but those two, it's tough to watch. And I think Chris Paul would kind of cover a lot of those flaws by just kind of taking the ball out of their hands a little more, which might be a good thing. I feel like, though, it'd be risky to pair Paul with Boston because I feel like with Coach Mazzulla, I feel like he's not as strong of a presence, and he's a lot newer of a coach, and his offense at times has been questionable, to where I'm worried that Chris Paul might essentially just bully him into submission. Because as we've known, Chris Paul and coaches, they don't always mix all the time. So that'd be interesting to see.
Absolutely. So yeah, that'll lead us into our next topic here on the TML podcast, and that is the head coaching carousel that we've been talking about pretty much since the end. Well, for some of these guys, end of the regular season, but for some of them, whenever they ended up leaving the postseason. And we're seeing a couple hires, a couple still open spots out there. But the first one I wanted to touch on, and that's old Frank Vogel coming back into the game for the Phoenix Suns. What did you make of this hire for Phoenix?
Before I get into this specific one, I just got to say, I think most of the coaching changes that were made prior to the official end of the NBA season have been head scratching. I feel like a lot of these franchises are trying to look for greener grass where there might not be any at all. I thought we saw a lot of great coaches lose their jobs this offseason, and I just got to say, wasn't a big fan of a lot of that. But diving into it, Frank Vogel for the Suns, he kind of brings something to the team that they're going to need, which he's a defensive-minded coach, and I think that could be a very good thing for the Suns. However, I thought Monty Williams was one of the best coaches in the NBA. I mean, there was a reason why he was one of, I believe, 4 coaches since 2019, which I think is another problem with the NBA and its continuity, is we're so quick to blame the coach that we change things up, and to where you're starting to see a lot of young players come into the league by their 4th or 5th season. They've already had 2 or 3 coaches, which I think that's a problem. But Monty Williams, I thought, was as green as the grass could be for the Phoenix Suns. I thought he was a great fit there. And I thought everything that happened this season, he did the best he could with it. I mean, his team was basically gutted by the Kevin Durant trade. So by the time, like you said, when they got into the playoffs, they didn't have a lot of depth, and Chris Paul got hurt, and Kevin Durant was dealing with injuries. He was in and out of the lineup since he got there. Um, I think the Suns acted too prematurely. I don't know. It's because the new ownership change with Matt Sheba. I don't really know. But what I do know for certain is I think the Suns made a mistake. Frank Vogel might be a decent enough replacement for Monty Williams, but he's not going to be as good.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't love this move. And for me, partially, it's just because I agree with you 100%. I would have not have let go of Monty Williams. And I think Ishbia was going to go outside the box with his head coaching hire. You know, obviously there was rumors there with Isaiah Thomas, who he's really good friends with, it seemed like, was sitting courtside with him at playoff games. And then obviously there's rumors that he might come into the front office as well. You know, we're talking about the original Isaiah Thomas, you know, the
Yeah.
Pistons Isaiah Thomas. But I thought he was going to go more outside the box on his head coaching hire. I think he went about as safe as you possibly can with Vogel. He's an adult. He's obviously won an NBA Finals, and there's one thing we know that Vogel can do, and that's he can coach up a defense. So he's definitely has that down, and obviously won a championship back with the Lakers and LeBron. So got to give him credit for that. But I think they went safe with this hire. I would not have gotten rid of Monty Williams the same reasons that you spelled out there. So for me, I got to say I do not love this move. And that moves us on to our second one, and that is Monty Williams, who got paid. He got absolutely paid by the Detroit Pistons as the new head coach. What did you make of this hire?
Well, I got to say, shout out to Monty Williams, a fringe rotational player his entire NBA career, which I think lasted at least like close to 8 or 9 seasons.
Yeah.
I think on this contract, which makes him the highest paid head coach in NBA history,
Yeah.
I think he's making more money on this deal than he did during his entire career as a player.
He might be.
So shout out Monty. I think this is a fantastic hire for the Pistons, and it shouldn't be a shock to anybody of me saying this, based off what I said about him with the Suns. Monty Williams has been proven to develop young players. I mean, look what he did to Devin Booker. Devin Booker turned into a superstar almost overnight, basically since the bubble, where the Suns did not lose a single game in their time there. And basically have been on a roll ever since, making the finals the next year, getting to the conference finals again in 2022. And then not having as great of a performance this year, but for reasons like injuries and lack of depth at times. I don't blame much of what happened in the Sun seasons on Monty Williams. So now he's with the Pistons, a lot of young talent, a lot of very interesting young players. We got Cade Cunningham, we got Marvin Bagley, who's still trying to find a way to rehab his image in the NBA and try to turn around his career, which I think he's been doing so far. He's looked good. James Wiseman's trying to do the same thing. I think this could be a really good thing for all those young players. I think we could see the Pistons make some strides because for basically the Pistons have been an essential non-factor in the NBA since the days of like the 04 Pistons and that run they had from like about 04 to 08, where they're a finals threat every single season, giving LeBron problems in the East. And then LeBron had one of the greatest playoff games of all time against them, I believe in 07 on his quest to his first NBA finals. But this is what the Pistons need. They need an adult in the room. They need a great coach. That's Monty Williams. He's going to develop the players. He's going to bring in invaluable experience to these young guys. And the NBA, the Central Division, they're going to have to watch out. I, as a Bulls fan, I don't love it because the last thing I need is another like brick in the road to come up and trip my team as we try to figure out what the hell we're doing. But the Pistons know what they're doing, and they hired one of the best coaches in the NBA.
Yeah, no doubt. I love this move, Monty going to Detroit. You know, I'm a big fan of Cade Cunningham. I expected big things for him coming in to the NBA, and I think, you know, obviously missing this entire sophomore season for him with that injury, you know, it can struggle and it can really set a lot of these get back. But I think one thing it did, a lot of those younger guys that maybe we weren't as high on had a lot of minutes this year. You know, Jaden Ivey coming in as the rookie was basically their starting point guard for most of the season. Jalen Duren too, where he was basically kind of the backup point guard once James Wiseman came in. But those two big men down low, a lot of talent. If you can tap into it, you can really turn some things around quickly. But I think Monty is going to do what he does best. He's going to get those guys to start playing up to their potential. And do Detroit, I think last year, I think coming into this season, I picked Detroit to kind of be that 12 seed in as far as at the bottom of the play-in. I'm going to be taking a look in next offseason. I really like what Detroit is building. Like all those young guys, I think Monty Williams is the perfect fit. And I love how they're just basically wrote him a blank check. Like, just, we need you. You're the guy that's going to lead us into the future. And I think with the Suns giving up on Monty, I think he needed someone like that to believe him. I think he was probably hurt. You know, he set up shop there in Phoenix, looked like he was going to be around for the long haul. Like you said, going to an NBA Finals, and kind of a new owner comes in. Kevin Durant comes in. I'm not blaming Kevin Durant for chasing him out by any means, but the expectations went up when Kevin Durant came in. And when you fall short, you know, losing in the second round, which they could be losing to the eventual NBA Finals, it could have just be the Nuggets year. So
Yeah.
we'll see. But Monty Williams just having to kind of be the fall guy for that, I think that can really set guys back. But going to Detroit, they believe in him. They need him, and he's going to have a long runway to get these guys going in the right direction. So I think it's a good fit really for both sides. But moving on now, we got the 76ers hiring of Nick Nurse. How did you feel about this move?
Now, it may come as a surprise, but even though Doc Rivers maybe should have been fired from the 76ers, it came to another thing where I wasn't sure it was still the right move, because I thought Doc was fine. I mean, his player won the MVP in the season. They
Yeah.
just ran into trouble in the
Couldn't
playoffs.
finish Boston. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, Boston's been a thorn in their side for a while now. It's either Miami or Boston for
Yep.
the 76ers. And that's just kind of been the story of them. Embiid didn't have a great playoffs. And it's starting to get to the point where we're blaming coaches for players' performances. Coaches can only do so much to affect the outcome of the game. At the end of the day, they can make all the adjustments they want and everything like that. But the players have to play.
Yeah.
The adjustment, they're okay. Maybe they make an adjustment. They play another guy, or they change the minutes around, or they change the lineups around. Well, those changes, those players that were in the plans for the changes, they have to perform or outperform whatever warranted the adjustment. And that doesn't always happen. And I think Doc Rivers, like Monty Williams, was penalized for stuff a little more out of his control. And when it came to the 76ers case, I didn't know there was a better candidate out there. However, I think Nick Nurse is a great coach who Toronto shouldn't have gotten rid of.
Yeah.
So I could kind of flip it back on Toronto like I did with Monty Williams and the Suns. What was Toronto thinking? I don't really know, because Nick Nurse won them the finals in 2019.
Yep.
Why is it with so many of these coaches, they're winning championships and doing pretty well? Like, look what Nick Nurse has had to do with the Toronto Raptors post Kawhi Leonard. There is a superstar. Wow, I can't talk today. A superstar-sized hole in Toronto. I've been saying it for years. You plug in a star, they're a very good team. The problem is Pascal Siakam, great player, not a true number one.
Yep.
Fred VanVleet, great player, not a true number two.
Yep.
You need a star with that team to be great. And the fact that Toronto ran out of patience with Nick Nurse is ridiculous to me. He won them a finals, and he outkicked his coverage with the roster that was given to him the past few years with the Toronto Raptors, always being in the hunt for the playoffs, always being a team that can come in and just ruin someone's season by stealing a game or potentially being a threat to steal a series. As we saw with the Sixers last year, it looked like it was going to be an easy series. And then Toronto just came in and threw a punch to kind of like make you kind of question whether or not the 76ers are going to get out of there. I think Nick Nurse is a great hire for the 76ers, as good as it can be. He might even be a better coach than Doc Rivers for them. So I think the 76ers rebounded better than most of the teams this offseason, or before we even got into the offseason, as far as coaching changes. So we'll just have to see if maybe Nick Nurse is the answer to the 76ers getting out of the second round and over the hump for the first time in the Joel Embiid era.
Yeah. I know Philadelphia obviously hopes Nick Nurse is the answer. For me, for this one, I said I don't mind the move. You know, I think that they wanted to go from a kind of raw guy in Doc Rivers to more of an X's and O's type of coach. I believe I actually predicted this one right a couple of podcasts ago when I said that I think Nick Nurse is going to be the next head coach of the Philadelphia 76ers. I completely understand that. But if I'm a fan of the 76ers, there's a lot more problems on that team than who was, had the biggest clipboard and who was leading the team in huddles. I
Mhm.
think what you should be more focused on is the downward play of your MVP in Joel Embiid. You should also be focused on what are you going to do in the point guard position, because I don't think James Harden is going to come back. And if he doesn't come back, obviously you have a huge hole. But if he does come back, how much do you have to pay him? And how much is that going to handcuff your front office moving forward?
Yeah.
And Daryl Morey, as much as I love him as a general manager, it seems like he has a blind spot for James Harden. It's just, I don't know. I don't understand it. Maybe James Harden, I mean, he's one of those guys that helped Daryl Morey get his name, but it's one of those things. I think there's a lot of problems with that roster. And I'm afraid Nick Nurse is going to end up in the opposite of what he was in Toronto. Like you said, he was looking for a superstar to plug in. Now I'm worried that he's just going to have the superstar and not have the guys around him. So it's going to be interesting to watch the 76ers moving
Yeah.
forward.
The NBA anarchist in me, it just wants to see James Harden go scorch earth and come back my way to Houston. Because
He
I
might.
know plenty of people. At one of my jobs, there's this guy, huge James Harden fan now.
Yeah.
That guy's gonna lose it if he comes back. That I can tell you that. People down here, they still love James Harden. I
Well,
can confirm.
and what I also love too, obviously the video that you posted of finding a James Harden Suns shirt, that has
Yeah,
been everywhere at this point.
blew up.
The latest rumor that we've seen is keep your eye on Phoenix for James Harden. I'm like, if that comes true, man, I don't know. We
Oh man.
might have to step back on that one. But
Yeah.
the last one I want to get into, and that's Adrian Griffin. He's taking over for the Milwaukee Bucks. How'd you feel about this move?
So Budenholzer isn't always the best coach. I think he's a really good coach. And I think I talked about this on a prior podcast, how we could see Budenholzer go to the Spurs, sit as like an assistant, and
Yeah, yeah,
eventually take up the mantle for Pop once Pop finally decides to call it quits, which at this point, like LeBron James's NBA career, I don't know if it's really ever going to
just
end,
keep going.
because until LeBron got swept out of the playoffs, there was really never a clear indication of whether he'd hang it up or not, because
Yeah,
it just didn't seem like reality. Anyway, getting back to the Bucks, Budenholzer was one of those firings where he would have been fired had he not won the playoffs in 2021, won the finals in 2021, and by 2023, he's out on the street,
yep,
no job. Again, like Nick Nurse, what have you done for me lately? It comes around so quick in the NBA. Like Monty Williams, finals in 2021, out on the street by 2023. But now he's in a better coaching situation, maybe with being the highest paid player in a franchise that'll probably stick behind him and let them go through growing pains. But whatever. Adrian Griffin, though, that's been a name thrown around in basically half the head coaching rumors of like the last half decade, maybe more, to where
yeah,
I even think there was a point where there was talk about him going to Milwaukee the first time around when
yeah,
they
yeah,
decided to hire Bud. Adrian Griffin is always someone that you hear come up. He's been on a lot of benches. I believe he was on Toronto's bench in 2019 when they won
yep.
it all. Um, he deserves this shot, and I think this could be a really good thing for Milwaukee. It'll be interesting because I know Bud and Giannis had a pretty close relationship. We heard it all the time. We even saw him post something after he got fired. And Milwaukee's starting to turn into a delicate situation where all these changes are happening. They got knocked out of the first round. They got knocked out of the playoffs last year and didn't get back to the finals. Will we see a point where maybe the Giannis era starts to break down? A lot of that team's getting older. Brook Lopez is into his mid-30s at this point. Drew Holiday is approaching his mid-30s. Chris Middleton's approaching his mid-30s. Like, this core is aging quickly. Giannis still in the prime of his career. I believe he's going to
Yeah.
be 29 next season, which seems weird to me. He's already that old. I still remember
Yeah, we're getting there.
going to Bucks games as a kid, and he's a scrawny little 18-year-old you
Yep.
never thought would play, and you didn't even at the time bother learning to pronounce his name because he'll be out of the league in a year or two. We've seen how these guys look, and all of a sudden he's one of the greatest players we've ever seen.
Yeah.
It's gonna be interesting to see what happens in Milwaukee. They Adrian Griffin better be the answer. They better have nailed this coaching hire, or else we might see Milwaukee go back into small market hell like they were for the previous 25 years to the Giannis era.
Yeah. Yeah, for this one, I just kind of put for Adrian Griffin and the Bucks. It's to be decided. I feel like we don't know enough about him as a head coach. I do really respect that he's put in the work as an assistant coach for the past 15 years. And I think that he's got a chance to be a really nice head coach. As you said, I pulled up his coaching record where he's been. He started in Milwaukee for a couple of years, was actually on your Chicago bench for about 5 years. Then he went over to
Yeah,
Orlando,
used to
OKC,
play
and then
for us.
yeah, he's been on Toronto ever since. So definitely a basketball guy. He's been around basketball for a long time, and he has absolutely put the time in. It kind of reminds me a lot of the Darvin Ham hire from last year, where he's one of those
Mhm.
guys. He put in the work. He earned it. This is his time, and he's got a chance to go and coach one of the greatest players we've ever seen in Giannis Antetokounmpo too. So
Yeah.
he's got the chance. I'm going to put to be decided, to be determined, because we'll see if he has what it takes as a head coach. I think Darvin Ham answered a lot of those questions kind of in the playoff run. I don't think no one's really crushing him. I mean, at the beginning of the season, obviously, he was very rough with that 2-10 start, but I don't think anybody's looking here as Darvin Ham is on any sort of hot seat. I think he did
Yeah.
probably more than what he was expected to do this season as a rookie head coach. And obviously, these coaches, they continue to learn. They get better as well. And we'll see what Adrian Griffin is able to do with Milwaukee. But as long as all those guys are coming back, with the age, with the experience they have, you still obviously expect them to be towards the top of the Eastern Conference when they get to playoff time. And he's going to ultimately be judged on what he does come postseason. And it's tough, and it's a very high bar for these NBA coaches, as we've touched on. But I think he's got a chance to be a pretty good to special head coach. He's put in his time. So we'll see where things go.
Yep. The teams just got to give their coaches opportunities,
Absolutely.
like players, to
Little
get better.
runway. Just give them a little runway. A lot of you can't. Rome wasn't built in a day. You can't turn everything around so
Exactly.
quickly. So you got to give these guys a little bit of run. But now it's time for our last and final segment on the TM Up podcast. That is, of course, TM Up, where we hand out our technical fouls of the week. Jarrett, who's getting that tech for you?
I'm very upset about this one.
Okay.
I am teeing up the NBA.
The
I'm
entire
teeing up the
NBA.
NBA, but it might not be for the reasons you think. Now, through these playoffs and through basically our entire lives watching basketball, what has been a very big problem, which you might not have seen it this way, because I think one of your favorite teams growing up was the most guilty of this tactic. But what is a big problem in the NBA? Through the play of games, maybe a little dishonest, may lead to the wrong calls, wrong players getting called with fouls. Yes, flopping. Flopping is a big problem in the NBA. It's been a big problem in the NBA. And the NBA dropped a little nugget about how they're going to fix that. The problem is they dropped it before the finals are over. So now I've been watching these playoffs with just kind of like this anger and resentment. But I'm like, why can't you make this change now? Because I love it. The NBA announced that they're considering, and they're going to test it out in Summer League, that they are going to implement technical free throws for clear incidents of flopping. So where if a player makes a clear flop, the other team gets a free throw and probably gets possession. And I'd love that. Oh my God, I've been waiting for that. I believe they kind of use this rule in college basketball, but my God, does the NBA need this so bad? Because I've been watching the playoffs, and there are times where I just want to like throw something at the TV because I just want to see good, honest basketball played. And it is not being played by these players flopping. And now I'm watching just with anger because the NBA just let the cat out of the bag too early for me to handle it, because now I am so excited for this potential change to hopefully fix the NBA and the honesty and the purity of the way basketball is played by its players. And I just have to sit through another week or two of it, just watching flops happen and just think, what if, what could be? I'm teeing up the NBA because they got me too damn excited. I'm too damn excited.
Oh, man. I'm going to use this opportunity to get on my soapbox a little bit here as well for my technical foul.
Stand on it.
My technical foul is going to be to the NBA media members who still, even after 2 months of playoff basketball, continue to disrespect the Miami Heat. All the talk about how this is going to be a quick series, that they haven't faced a real challenge yet, and they're discrediting the run so far. Even, after game 1, we were hearing it's going to be a sweep. It's going to be a sweep. Get the brooms out. It was one game in Denver. Can we calm down before we talk about the sweeps? It's ridiculous. I would never understand why certain members of the media cannot change their opinion based on the new information that we've been presented. Miami, over the past 2 months, has been one of the 2 best teams in basketball. That is why they are here. They have won the most games to get to this point. They beat Milwaukee. They beat New York. They beat Boston in a game 7 at the Garden. They took a game in Denver, something no one else has been able to do this entire postseason. And all they do is try to poke holes. And we weren't hearing this before we knew Miami went on this magical run. When Miami beat Milwaukee, I remember the narrative. It was like, man, they came out, they were the tougher team. They were great. They executed. Now all I'm hearing is, well, Giannis was hurt. That's what I'm hearing now. They're already making excuses. Giannis was hurt. Giannis missed about a game and a half. They won the game that he missed. He came back. Miami out-executed him. They chased him off. They chased him away from the free throw line those last 2 games of the series. He was afraid to shoot. They over-executed. They out-hustled Milwaukee. They beat them. And now, obviously, we're going to talk about the almost reverse sweep where they go up 3-0. And without putting in context, yeah, they almost did, but they didn't. And they won game 7 in Boston at the Garden. Give them a little bit of credit. They've been able to do things this postseason that no one has been able to do. And obviously, I picked Miami to win this series. And I could very well be wrong that Denver is just a better team and they will win this series. But to act like Miami is not a good team and that they don't belong in the NBA Finals is dead wrong. If you didn't want the Heat in the NBA Finals, someone should have beaten them before they got there, but no one was able to, and now here we are. So stop discrediting them. They may lose. That's definitely a possibility. Denver is a great team, but stop acting like they don't belong to be there because they're Miami Heat and because they have a little 8 next to their name when you look on the scoreboard. Because Miami has been a great team for these past 2 months, and we have to update our thinking as new information comes in. So that's my technical foul this week, is to those NBA media members who will not change their opinion until they are literally holding a Larry O'Brien trophy. That will be the only thing that'll change. They'll be like, you know what? Miami might have been a pretty good team this year, but that's the only thing that'll change it. And if we don't see that, they will still say that Miami just got, ran roughshod over. So that's my soapbox.
At your home arenas out there, you may be screaming, beat the Heat, but Jace is screaming, respect the Heat.
Respect the Heat, 100%. And I've been saying it for 2 months now. And I will say, I didn't see this run coming. New information comes in. They're a different team, and they have been for almost 2 months now. Pay some respect. That's all I'm asking for. But that's all we have this week on the TMO podcast. I want to thank you guys all for joining, listening, and following along on all of our social media platforms throughout the week for fun NBA content. This has been a fun one. We are in the middle of the NBA Finals, and as the NBA, it does not stop giving us headlines. It continues to go. So we will continue to break those down as they come up. But that's all we have this time, and we'll check you guys next time.
And remember, stop being so quick to fire your damn coaches.
Absolutely.